Well, tonight I am absolutely compelled to talk about the 14th Amendment and my favorite lawn gnome, Mr. Robert Reich, the gentleman who supposedly has a grasp on economics and now claiming he has some sort of grasp on the Constitution as well. And I find this man utterly baffling because, on one hand, I know he can't be an absolute idiot. Yet the things he writes about indicates either that he's writing things he doesn't believe because it's expedient for his political views because it's the current political views in vogue, or he really believes this, so it makes it hard to understand how he could be an intellectual if he really believes this kind of stuff. So essentially, what's happening is he's invoking the 14th Amendment, claiming that uh, it gives some sort of power to stop this showdown that's occurring in Congress over the debt ceiling. In his recent article, he says, let House Republicans argue in the courts that the 1917 Act establishing the debt ceiling has precedence over Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, which requires that, quote, the validity of the public debt, shall not be questioned, close quote. Now, whenever you see a whole bunch of dots in the middle of a sentence like that, especially when the source sentence is fairly short, you know you're looking at fantastic uh, political scholarship. So, let's get rid of this. Okay, so here's the actual text of the 14th Amendment, Section 4. The validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized by law, including debts incurred for payments of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned, but neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in the aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for any loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. So essentially, the 14th Amendment came as about uh, cleaning up after the Civil War in terms of law. The other sections are not pertinent to this section. Each section really should have kind of been its own amendment on its own, but I mean, it's concise and gets to the point. So, the primary thing they were attempting to do here is they wanted to uh, ensure that the debts that the North had incurred there were a lot running the war, that at some point a Southern dominated Congress couldn't just say, well, we're invalidating these debts. And that was a potential fear because one of the things that happens is because of the 14th Amendment, the 3/5 clause is now revoked. So all the freed slaves are now counted as whole individuals, which ups their representation of each state that held them in Congress. So there was some fear that the southern states could be in a position where they're actually running the House of Representatives and that they might say, well, we're invalidating the debts you ran up during the Civil War. And then obviously the second half of it is saying, okay, the debts that the Confederacy ran up are not the obligation of the rest of the government. If the state owes money, they owe money, but it's not part of the national debt structure. So if we were to stretch this beyond all imagination and say, okay, they're actually talking about the idea that the public debt can't be questioned, and they're talking about even the public debt we're holding today, which they may or may not be. It's irrelevant, but let's say they are. Okay, so what that means is if you look at it in current terms, all the debt we've currently accrued can't be questioned, meaning at some point we have to do something with that debt. It needs to be validly dealt with. However, that doesn't say that future debt, which the deficit that we're running up this year, is called into question because it's not debt yet. It hasn't been turned into debt. It's not public debt. So therefore, it wouldn't fall under this, assuming it's even actively controlling the government in terms of a constitutional reading. So the other point being is that okay, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law. Okay, the debt ceiling is part of the U.S. government debt structure, how things work, and it's authorized by law. It's a law of the United States. The Congress has the ability to do this. So if we, let's assume, again, continuing to assume that this holds our debt to be unquestionable, that means that if for some reason they don't resolve this issue and we come up against a debt ceiling, it obligates the U.S. government first to deal with financing the debt, and potentially, I mean, they could pay debt, but that's not something we do anymore, really. So it requires them first to pay for the financing of the debt. They are not allowed to ignore that particular financing because that invalidates the structure of the debt, the way things were set up, the agreements, the payouts, and everything. So what ends up happening, and this has happened in the past, if we run up against a debt ceiling, what ends up happening is the Secretary of the Treasury now has an obligation to start saying, okay, these are the things that need to be paid in what order, and essentially racking and stacking. And of course, the first thing would be the financing of the debt. The second thing would be social programs that are considered inviolate. Social Security being one of them, because technically the Social Security program operates out of a different fund, so it doesn't really fit into what's going on with the debt ceiling per se, and it has to be because it has its own source of tax revenue. Now, the other thing being is during this time, there's still revenue coming in, so it's not like you hit the ceiling and everything dries up. So money will exist to pay the financing of the debt. Money might not exist to pay for other programs. And essentially, if we view this to be controlling governmental decisions, what it essentially says is when we hit the debt ceiling, the treasurer must finance the debt and then figure out in what order things aren't going to get paid underneath it. It does not obligate the United States to carry forward and say, oh, well, we said we were going to go 500 additional billion in debt this year, so therefore we're obligated to go forward with it. We're not, because it's not debt yet. It's deficit. It's future debt. Okay, hope I cleared that up a bit. Just, again, this is stuff that just blows my mind, because it's like, where does this guy come up with this stuff? And yeah. All right. Well, if you came across this due to the YouTube algorithm and you're not one of my regular subscribers, please consider subscribing. Take a look at my other titles. I do a lot of different things. Political, economic, history, movie reviews, TV series reviews, philosophy, all kinds of stuff. Please smash the like button. Have any questions below? Do you think the 14th Amendment means what the Democrats say it does, or at least what they're pretending it is? Because it always seems like the Democratic Party is at its point of deepest desperation when they reach out to the Constitution for defense. Uh, if you think what they're saying is accurate, tell me in the comments why you think so. All right, and if you think there's somebody out there who might find this interesting or useful, please consider sharing it with them. Okay, well, I appreciate you spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.